Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are here today with pretty much everybody that works at Infragistics, not just all of the product team.
All the important people,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
All of the important people that worked on Infragistics Ultimate 15.2. We have people coming in from all around the world today who are going to be participating and demonstrating all the great things that are in this release. So before I bore everybody with my own voice, I'm going to pass it over to Jason and take it away.
Cool, thanks. It's actually not all the important people, it's all the good-looking people. We've got Mike in here, we got George, Ambrose, Brian Lagunas is on the line. We have folks in our web team in Sophia, Amel and Yavor on the line, and probably some others I haven't mentioned. But basically today, we have everyone who can answer questions for you, from product managers to product owners. We're going to show a bunch of demos, talk to you about 15.2. It's a pretty exciting release, and we're just continuing to improve what we're shipping in Infragistics Ultimate. So my name is Jason Barris. The date's wrong. It's not October 9th anymore. That's just when we created this slide deck. So don't get confused about that. It's really it's October 15th. So we always talk about design at Infragistics. We consider ourselves a UX company. We have UX tooling. We have UX services. We do a lot of user experience work for our customers, and that flows into our controls. So what we talk about is that great apps actually happen by design. And the way we look at building out great software is it starts with design, and then it flows into the great UI controls that we ship across desktop, across mobile, across web. So today we're going to talk about desktop, WPF Windows Forms, not so much Windows 8. Brian will mention a little bit about what you can expect from us coming on Universal Windows Platform. We're going to talk about mobile controls. We have a big release for Android product this October, this 15.2. So we're RTMing Android, and we're going to continue to invest in iOS, Android, and Xamarin. And then on the website, of course, we cover all the bases. The big investment, obviously, and we hear this loud and clear from you, is around jQuery, JavaScript, HTML5. Those are the apps that you're building. That's where you want us to spend time, and we continue to do that. So you're going to see in this release lots of TypeScript enhancements, lots of Angular enhancements, and then other features that we've added into the product, and some nice ease-of-use capabilities for MVC within Visual Studio. And then really at center stage for this release, we've done some really cool stuff with Indigo Studio, with Indigo Design, and George is going to do a little demo on that. So we talk about these areas of investment in what we want to bring to the table with Ultimate. It's the best-of-breed UX solutions for designers, developers, testers, and users. So we want to enable you to build the fastest and easiest Office-inspired, touch-enabled, enterprise-ready apps. Financial services is our largest footprint, and the reason is because we spend a lot of time not only on quality, but high performance, high volume, data grids, data charts, and that's where we spend a lot of this time to ensure that you have an enterprise-ready experience. And then, of course, ensuring that we have the latest styles and themes so your apps can look like Office. We have touch on every platform, and we're going to continue to invest there. And then for connected experiences, continue to invest in mobile. And then today we'll talk a little bit about branding and styling across Windows Forms, Ignite UI, and Brian will touch on it as well for WPF. So our goal really is to make it dead simple for you guys to build amazing apps. And if it's not dead simple, then we have to keep working on it and improve every step of the way. And that's where your feedback comes in. So I can't stress enough, use our user voice site, ideas.infragistics.com. We have forums there for all of the products. And if there's something that you want to see, something you want us to improve, let us know. I get emails all the time from customers, and it says things like, hey, I see you guys didn't add a lot to this particular control, or you didn't add these features. And my immediate response is, what do you want? Because whatever you guys need is what drives our roadmap. Obviously, we're trying to keep ahead of technology, understand all the latest and greatest UI patterns, how you guys want to build applications. but it's very important that you tell us, and that really does drive what ends up in the product. So when we do build out and kick off our releases, in fact, we're just kicking off 16.1 and talking about the vision for 16.1, 16.2, then moving into 2017, there's 3 areas we ask our teams to really focus on: productivity, usability, and reliability. So if you can't be productive, then we didn't do a good job. If the controls aren't usable right outside of the box, which means if we don't have the right properties, if the designer doesn't work correctly, if you can't get up and running very quickly, then we have to go back to the drawing board. And then finally, reliability. Everything should just work. When you put a control on a form, it should just work. You shouldn't have to configure anything. And then when you run it, it should have the right defaults, the right experience right outside the gate. In the past, when we shipped controls, it was sort of like ship the least amount of capability by default, and then let you guys sort of turn on features as you need it. But at the end of the day, we know what features people commonly use because that's why we add them into the product. So a lot of the defaults you see improving across the control. So when you do run it for the first time without you touching it, you actually have a much better experience right outside of the gate. So let's get into 15.2. And of course, like I mentioned, we have a lot of folks here who can answer questions. So please use the chat window throughout the webinar to ask questions. So with WPF, at this point, I'm going to pass over to Brian Lagunas, who's our product owner on WPF and very well known in the industry. And he's going to talk about what we've done in WPF and the investments that we're making there. So let me go ahead and share my screen with Brian. All right, Brian, you're on.
All right, I got it. Let me know when you see my screen and I'll begin.
We see it.
Okay, great. That means everyone else can see it. Hey everyone, my name is Brian Lagunas. As Jason mentioned, I'm the product owner for mainly all the XAML stuff we have. And I'm really excited about 15.2 because this particular release is basically all about you guys, all about our customers. Your voice has never been louder than what it is now. And a big reason of that is because of a website we introduced not too long ago, about a year ago, based on user voice. It's at ideas.infragistics.com. This is where you go to request these features, ask for these things, and then, of course, they sit out and get votes and community feedback, and based on that feedback, we implement them. And this is where the heart of this release for WPF came from. 15 of the 16 features that WPF got came directly from you, directly from user voice. So if you've ever felt that your voice isn't being heard, go to user voice and speak a little louder because we're definitely listening. Okay, having said that, let's kind of jump into what actually we got for 15.2 for WPF. And the first control is actually I'm pretty excited about is a XAML busy indicator control. Now I know what you're thinking, like, Brian, man, these have been around a long time. That's true, but we've never had one, but we do now. You guys told us on user voice, how could you be missing this? And you're like, holy cow, you're right, and we added it. And not only did we add it, we added the best XAML busy indicator on the market, period. Basically, we learned from everyone else, and for those of you who know me, I actually wrote the original busy indicator in the WPF extended toolkit, so we have some experience with this. Now, as you would expect, the busy indicator is a control that shows the progress of a long-running process that happens in the background. We have over 8 really cool built-in animations. We support both determinate and indeterminate states. I can explain that in a minute during the demo. Of course, you can delay visibility, provide custom busy content. Everything you would expect with a busy indicator you can do with ours, except it's just easier to do with ours. So to demonstrate that, I'm just going to go ahead and hop into a small demo to kind of show you how you would use this. So right now I have an application, WPF. I have a basic view. As you can see, I have a list box that's bound to items. I have a button that's bound to a start process command. If we look at our view model, we'll see we have some properties defined back here. Here's our collection. Here's our command. As you can see, this is a delegate command. This is a Prism 6.1 command. So I get that from NuGet. I just downloaded the prism.wpf NuGet package and I get this command. And then we have some code here. When that command invokes, we're generating some items, actually 10 million items. And then we're populating the items collection. That's data bound to the view. So as it sits, this is kind of how it is. It's just kind of a single threaded app. We're going to hit start. And this is kind of how a lot of people write their apps today. But let's see the problem with this. So here's the window. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit start process. And now I can't drag anything around. I can't interact with the view. My UI is locked. It's frozen. Okay, and then when the operation is complete, now I get it back. That's no good. So the first step in using a busy indicator is to put these processes on a separate thread. And it's really easy to do. So let's just take this generate items, and we're going to convert this to a task. And when we convert that to a task, we actually have to return a new task. So we say, hey, task.run, and then we'll just stick our little, we're just going to wrap all of this into a task.run. Oh, went a little low on that. There we go. There we go. So we turn that to a task.run. That's all we have to do right there. Perfect. Now we just use our nice await syntax here, turn that into an async, and voila, we are multi-threaded. Pretty cool, right? So if we run the app again, I can hit start process, I can drag my window around, I can interact with it some more. My UI is not frozen, but I still don't know something's going on in the background until it magically appears. That's not good. That's where the busy indicator comes into play. So what we want to do is we go to our toolbox and just drag our busy indicator over. And what we want to do is we want to wrap the content that we want to show this indicator over. In this case, it's the entire view. That may not always be the case, but in this case it is. Now that we have the busy indicator, we have to show it somehow. Now the busy indicator has a property called isBusy. I'm going to create a binding, and it's going to bind to a property in our view model, and we're going to call it isBusy. So I'm going to go back to my view model. I'm going to add a new property. It's going to be a Boolean. We'll call it isBusy. And then right before we start our async process, we're going to set the isBusy equal to true. And then we're going to set the isBusy equal to false when it's done. That's all we got to do. So let's run the application. Start our process. And now we got this cool little animation that said, hey, something's going on. I know about it. The user knows about it. I can still interact with other parts of the app. And then when it's done, the indicator's hidden. Cool. Well, what's also cool about our busy indicator is that we actually have a number of default animations. For example, I'm going to come into the busy animation property. So we go busy indicator animation. As you can see, we have an Azure, gears, progress bar, progress ring, spinners, all kinds of cool stuff. So let's say I want to use an Azure animation. So let's run this and see what the Azure animation looks like. Great. But now let's say, you know what, I want to make the top elements a different color than the bottom elements. I want to control that. Well, of course you could do it via a style, but if you just wanted something quick and simple, we could just make the upper elements red and the lower elements, I don't know, blue. Run the application. And there you go. Dead simple. Easy to change, easy to manipulate, and you can do this with any animation we have. But what about those scenarios where, okay, Brian, that's cool, but the progress bar, you know, the animation is just kind of going. It's just spinning and spinning, and I don't see the actual progress occurring. Well, that's because what we have by default is an indeterminate state, meaning we don't know when it's going to end, but when it does, the busy indicator is going to go away. But what about those instances where you want to know the progress? Well, let's do that. the first thing we have to do is enable our background thread or our task to report that progress. So we're going to start by creating an iProgress of t, which is going to be a double. And we'll just call this progress. We're going to create a new progress of double, and then pass in the method that needs to invoke. So we'll say update progress. Create that method. And this is actually going to be a percentage, so we know what we're messing with. Now that we have that, we need to report this progress. So right in this loop, I know I can calculate how far into this we are. So I'm just going to do a quick little, hey, if the I mod 1500 equals 0, then let's go ahead and report our progress. So we're going to calculate our percentage here by taking our I and dividing it by the max records. So now we have a percentage. Then we could take our progress and report that, passing that percentage. So what that's going to do, that's going to call this update here, and then now we can do something to let our indicator know what the progress is. Now you're probably asking, why are we doing this mod 1500 equals 0? Well, basically we have 10 million records, and we don't want to flood the UI with a bunch of messages. So I'm just going to throw a message up every now and then. This is plenty good, for my needs. So since I need to bubble that up to the UI, we need another property. So we're going to make another property, type double. This is going to be progress. And then I can set this property in this method. Now, let's go to our busy indicator. We're going to set the progress value. Now, the progress value is actually a percentage from 0 to 1. So we're going to create that binding, and we call that property progress. But there's one more thing we have to do. We have to set the is indeterminate to false. We're no longer indeterminate, we are determinate. Okay, now let's run the application. Oh, actually, before I do that, we have to pick an animation that supports an indeterminate state. Luckily, we have a nice little naming convention that lets you do that. If it supports reporting progress, it's going to start with progress. So progress bar, progress ring. Let's just pick progress ring. Run the animation. Hit start. And there we go. We're updating the UI. We get the percentage complete. Beautiful. And you know what else? It's simple. It's dead easy. One more thing I want to mention before we move on is you can also create what's called busy content. So this allows you to put anything you want inside of or just below the animation that's playing. So we put our loading down there. Now, busy content is an object, so you don't have to put a string in. It could be IG, SAM busy indicator, busy content, and you could throw a button in there, for example. Run the app, and there you go. And then you can cancel, the progress that's occurring in the background, right? So super easy to use. There's a ton more features that we don't have really time to cover, but we have a sample browser that shows them all off. It's really slick. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Besides the SAM busy indicator, we did a lot around productivity and smaller new features. So the data chart, we got properties for major and minor grid line intervals. This means, so your major line axes, right? So in this image you'll see green lines and red lines. You no longer have to calculate these on your own in the background. We have a minor grid line interval that you can set, and when you zoom in and zoom out, you don't have to do all the calculation manually anymore. It's automatic and it's easy. Okay, we expose the read-only property for the axis interval. This is just for those scenarios where you want to know what the axis interval is in code. The text document framework, this is basically the framework our rich text editor relies on. You can now do custom diagnostics. The SAM rich text editor itself, the UI control, You can now pinpoint the location of your mouse using screen point. So if you needed to insert text or get text or whatever you need to do, you can do that now. The property grid got a lot of love. Now we have support for custom sorting, which is really cool because you can not only just custom sort on properties, but you can custom sort your categories. And you can do it via attributes. You can do it with comparers. I mean, there's a lot of options there. It's really cool. Actually, I'm probably going to blog about that because it's that cool. Okay, we have support for custom editors on expandable objects, and basically an expandable object is an object that has children, right? So say person, and that person has its own properties. Well, now you can throw in your own custom editor for that entire person. And of course, we have support for property descriptors, so iCustom type descriptor. So if you ever had that scenario where you have a collection and you're bound to that collection, and then the value, over in the value field, the collection says list of T count 600 or whatever. Well, now you can provide a custom property descriptor that says like employees collection or auto collection or something like that. You can provide a more descriptive information about the object itself, which is really, really helpful. And then the XAML data grid, lots of cool stuff here. The biggest things I want to mention is the new record filter type of multi-select Excel style. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the sample browser. This is WPF sample browser. And what I mean by that is I have the Excel style set on the filter operand for the XAML data grid. Now, what that does is that now gives me this Excel style filtering capability that we didn't used to have on the record row. Previously, the only way to get that was to use the labels as the filter. You remember the little icon, and you would click on that icon, and then you would have the ability to have the Excel style. Well, now you have the Excel style on the record row directly, which is really helpful. It also got support for iNotify data error info. So you guys are probably familiar with iData error info. Well, that's the old way of doing things. The new way in .NET 4.5 and going forward is iNotify data error info. So start using that. The combo box got respect for an enum description attribute. So now when you have enums, you don't have to show the value, apples and oranges or whatever. You can actually say provide descriptive text, like this is the apple selection, and it will show that text. And of course, we always do performance optimization. And one more thing I want to mention is the template field now has support for template selectors. The XAML spreadsheet also got support for data validation, which is really slick. And then that's it for WPF. I do want to mention we don't have any slides on Universal Windows support right now, so UWP. But right now, as we speak, we are working on getting a new product out built specifically for UWP, and we're hoping to have a preview ready by the 16.1 release, if not sooner, to the XAML insiders. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jason to continue with Windows Forms.
Great, thanks, Brian. So a lot of cool stuff in XAML, and as Brian said, UWP is right around the corner. It's all part of our cross-platform strategy where it sort of dovetails right with iOS, Android, and Xamarin. So as we've talked about previously and we've blogged about, we do a lot of code translation, code sharing, so expect the same capabilities, similar API to what you're getting today in XAML, in WPF, in iOS and Android, in the new Universal Windows platform. So it'll be pretty exciting when we start getting that out, and as adoption for Windows 10 continues, it'll be probably on your list of things to start caring about next year and in years to come. So let's talk about Windows Forms. So Windows Forms really is still the largest footprint of enterprise apps in the market. You know, we have lots and lots of big enterprise customers, and many of them are still building and maintaining Windows Forms applications. So it's very important that Infragistics continues to innovate, add capabilities, and make Windows Forms completely awesome. And this release, we've done a bunch of stuff to sort of continue that trend. the big feature we're adding, and it's a CTP, but it's a pretty darn good CTP. I would call it, CTP beta, primarily because the docs are semi-weak and we don't have a ton of samples, but we have a really good sample that really shows off all the capabilities, and I'll show that. But we have a spreadsheet control. So when you think about a spreadsheet control versus a grid control, our grid controls and most tabular grid controls, including something like a pivot grid, are column-based by type. So, for example, if I have a date field, that date, every cell in that specific column displaying that data will need to be a date. And that's how you can do easy things like sorting and grouping, etc., get that sort of Outlook experience. A spreadsheet's different. A spreadsheet, literally, every cell is independent, but cells are aware of other cells through the API. So you have a really cool experience where you can have different types of data in the same column. You can do calculations. You can do tables, images. You can do all sorts of ad hoc grid work in a spreadsheet, which is pretty slick. And we'll talk a little bit more about the features there in one slide. Data chart, we're continuing to invest in our move for a brand new, modern, touch-enabled data chart experience in Windows Forms. The Ultra chart, which we shipped back in 2003, has run its course. You can't continue to add modern capabilities to a code base that old. It really wasn't meant for that. And back then, if you guys remember, Bill Gates was still touting the tablet PC as the wave of the future. So touch really wasn't that important. A lot of the high volume stuff really wasn't coming to light in what customers are asking for. So we sort of decided that we needed to take the innovations we made on the XAML side and on the native side and move that over to Windows Forms. And that's what we've been doing over the last 3 releases. So this release, we've RTM'd some new series and added a bunch of new capabilities like better gesture support, annotation layers, being able to export and save chart types to different types of images. We've added a bunch of capabilities around legends and then value overlays. So being able to overlay things on top of charts, where you start getting into multiple series with overlays, it gets pretty fancy on what you can actually display in the chart. And I'll show a couple samples of that in a little bit. And then the spreadsheet control, as I mentioned, this is sort of the short list of the capabilities we're shipping in the CTP version. So all of the cell formatting you can imagine, the ability to merge cells, do undo, redo, split panes, all of your cut, copy, paste support, editing, formula support is in there, zooming, multiple tabs, hyperlinks. So, you guys can read this and play with the samples, but the idea is we have a pretty complete spreadsheet control. And where this becomes important is when you look at virtualized data, having the ability to have multiple tabs of virtualized data in a display that's maybe not your traditional tabular data that you would show in a grid. You can do some pretty interesting displays with a spreadsheet. This ends up being one of our top requests over time, and that's really why we invested in it on the XAML side. We moved it over to Windows Forms, and then next year you can expect to see it in JavaScript and other platforms as well. On the data chart, some access interval features, major and minor access intervals on the category series, so you can see the lines and how those intervals actually look when you display them. Of course, they can be styled however you like. They don't need to be green and red. But the idea is, as you use things like tooltips and overlays and you want to get more precise on the data display, the overlays actually, the spacing actually helps you understand where you're at hovering over the chart. On the ease of use side, we made some cool improvements. Just because of the Excel spreadsheet, we've enabled superscript and subscript inside of the formatted text editor. So the formatted text editor is actually used in the spreadsheet. The pivot grid, we're continuing to improve binding with flat data source and OLAP data source. Win grid, we added summary rows height. All this stuff is actually directly from user voice. So as Brian mentioned, user voice is going to drive these features. That's what's happening here. And then one of the neater things as far as Toolbars Manager is having these Facebook-style notifications, and I'll show a quick demo of that as well, where when you look at your mobile phone, you have an overlay of a display of the number of items that happen to be in your Pinterest or your Facebook or whatever. We've added that capability. And then continuing to give you a beautiful look and feel. We have here, it's called Excel 2013. While it's the same for 2015, you have a beautiful green, beautiful blue styles, and I'll do a quick demo of those as well before we jump on to mobile. So let me minimize my my screen here, and I'm going to pop open our Windows Form samples here. So this is the Windows Form sample browser. We redesigned this last year. We're continuing to improve sort of how we display the new features to you, and then bleed that down into all of the different categories of controls that we have. So first off, let me go to our toolbar notification badges. I'm just going to open up this sample. We'll launch this guy. And so what you see here when the ribbon pops up is you'll notice that over copy, over paste, we've got numbers like 9 and 8. I got 1, 2, 3 here at the bottom. So essentially, any type of notification position on any area of the toolbar. So we have ribbon tabs. We have them on the toolbar. We could have them on the quick access toolbar. We could actually have them on the application menu. So anywhere that you can imagine having some sort of notification inside of your toolbar, you can actually do that. And then as well, you've got different areas where you can position the notification. So I just changed it to text area. I can actually make it the whole area, icon area, or the default's going to be basically in that upper right. I can make it top left. I can make it bottom right. And I can also change the border style of this notification. Here's a dash. You can see it turned a little square. And then we have a couple rounded options. But the point is, and even displaying shadows to give it sort of a pop off of the screen. The point is, as usual, with the Windows Forms controls and the presentation layer framework, you pretty much have every possible way to configure the notifications on the toolbar. So it's actually a pretty cool feature. We're pretty excited about it. And again, this is driven right from requests that we're getting from user voice, along with a bunch of the other stuff that I mentioned. The spreadsheet control, I'll launch this guy. What we did in 15.2 is we actually shipped a single sample, but you'll notice that along the bottom we have a bunch of tabs. So this is the experience that you can expect inside of the spreadsheet. So you've got a multi-tab experience. Literally, when you load an Excel file in this spreadsheet and you hold it next to Excel, you cannot tell the difference. It's pixel perfect. I mean, it's so amazing how good of a job we did in not only the Windows Forms spreadsheet, but also the XAML spreadsheet to give you Excel without actually needing Excel on your computer. As you know, we've had this Excel library over the years, and we have a ton of features in the Excel library. Well, the Excel library is actually the core of this spreadsheet. So as Brian mentioned, we added some new features to the Excel library. Well, those features then get put into the spreadsheet control. So as we improve, or as we look at feature requests for spreadsheet, step one, get them in Excel library. What that means for you is that you can actually create everything that you see here in memory without actually needing to display it on the spreadsheet. So anyway, it's pretty cool. As I just kind of flip through some of the capabilities here, different data displays, background, fills, image support, different shape support, underline support, hyperlinks, obviously protected cells, custom grid lines, some simple math, and it actually ends up being a pretty slick tool. I can click the plus sign here. I can add empty sheets, so you can see I'm adding sheet 23, 22, 21, and then if I add like 1, 2, 3, and then I'll just do a sum here. So let's do a sum of B1 to B3. Obviously kind of simple. Oh, whoops. I need to put the equal sign, sorry. and you'll see that it's 6, so it actually does the calculation, but you can do extremely complex formulas with this, pretty much anything you can imagine in Excel. So pretty exciting. Please check out this spreadsheet. Start using it. If you have questions, go to the forums. If you want features, go to user voice. But it's pretty cool. If you're wondering about, hey, something isn't here, take a look at the XAML spreadsheet, because that's a little bit more mature. It's been out for a bit longer, and it has a little bit more polish. As far as docs go, the XAML spreadsheet and the Windows Forms spreadsheet have the same API. So if there's something missing in our docs, which is primarily why we CTP things, is because our docs aren't ready, take a look at the XAML docs, and you'll find pretty much what you need there. So I'll just open up a couple more samples here on Windows Forms. You can see here we have different value overlays. So as I'm moving the overlay on the chart, this purple bar, so what this means is when you're displaying visualizations and you want to highlight that this is a baseline or this is where we were, this is completely different than trend lines. So this is just an overlay across a value point. So we basically have every trend line you can imagine, every financial indicator you can imagine. The value overlay is really just a different overlay on top of the chart to highlight data points. And then I'm going to go down to one more thing here, actually 2 more things. Let me open up the category series. And the reason I want to bring this guy up is just to do some of the touch interaction. So I'm running a, let's see, what is this? This is a Lenovo X1 Carbon. My computer is a Dell XPS 13, pretty slick machine. But you can see here, my mouse isn't moving. This is all my finger moving this. And it's super duper responsive local. If you look at it over the WebEx, it might be a little bit slower. But the idea is we've done the same responsive, amazing touch experience where the axis labels zoom in and out. You have smooth rendering, etc. on this Windows Forms chart. So you want to do a modern experience with touch, the Windows Forms chart actually does it really well. And then finally on the Windows Forms side, I wanted to bring up Win App Stylist. Using ISLs, the Infragistics style libraries, is how we put forward new themes. So we shipped a few new themes, as I mentioned. I'm going to go ahead and open. Oh, look at that. We've encountered a problem. No problem. Let's open this up again. So my WinApp Stylist encountered a problem. We're going to reload WinApp Stylist. And what I want to do is I want to go to File, and I'm going to open my style library here. So let's go to Users. And this is actually good because you'll see where the stuff is at. We install everything under Public because since Windows 7, I believe, or Vista, write permissions are limited on desktop. So if I go to Public Documents, I see Infragistics 15.2, and I will go to Windows Forms, App Stylist, Styles, and these are all my ISLs. So let me scroll down here, and you'll see we've got Office 2013, light or dark gray, light gray, white, and then Outlook, dark gray, light gray, white. So let me look at the light gray Office 2013, and I'll click over to Grid, for example, and you can see here we've got really nice blue hover on the grid, and that follows through basically to every single control. You get the beautiful colors and styles that flow through. And of course, with App Stylist, you can pretty much change whatever you want. It's up to you. So that was our light gray. Let me go to dark gray. And you'll see dark gray has this nice Excel look and feel. And this basically mimics Office 2015 as well. So you can use it for either one. But to do this, obviously, it's one line of code. You just load up your App Stylist in your initializer of your app, and you point it to the ISL, and then your entire application takes on that color, but then you can, or that theme, and then you can actually individually change controls or change forms with different styles as well. So that wraps up Windows Forms. Lots of cool stuff. We're continuing to invest in Windows Forms, a question I get all the time. So at this point, because we're really running out of time, I want to pass it back to Brian. Well, actually, no, I'm going to run through a few slides, and then I'm going to pass it back to Brian because I want to talk about our mobile controls, and Brian's going to do a quick demo. So as I mentioned in the beginning, native mobile is really important to us. So hybrid mobile, obviously we have Ignite UI, we have a bunch of controls that'll work on a desktop browser, a tablet, or a phone. So hybrid mobile is a little bit different. Native mobile is where I want to write an Android app in Java, or I want to write an iOS app in Objective-C or Swift, and I want to have Xamarin bindings. We're investing in this, and what we're using is all the technology we've built over time to translate controls and share code. So when you look at controls like our grids, like our charts, you'll have the same experience across all of the native platforms. So last year we released a grid control. Actually, it was December of 2013. We CTP'd a grid control in Android, iOS, and then it flowed through to Xamarin Forms. Well, we got a lot of feedback on that control, and we looked at the scenarios that people were asking for, and we basically rewrote it. So more or less started from scratch, re-architected some of the underpinnings of the grid. So that's why you see a new grid control for Android. This control will end up in iOS soon, and it'll be the same exact control that you get in Universal Windows. So our goal is everything that we build gets translated and gets moved over to these other platforms, so we more or less have it at the same time, and it absolutely has the same capabilities, which makes it good for platforms like Xamarin Forms, where you're actually writing in C# to a single API, and then we're generating the code. And then the other big news with Android is RTMing the chart. So we've had this chart in the market for over a year. We've worked really hard to make sure it's optimized for the small mobile devices like we've done in iOS. Android is a little different as far as memory goes and different array of devices, but you'll see that we've got all of these data visualization controls that you've seen across all of our other platforms are now available in Android as well. So we've demoed the charts before. I'm not going to go ahead and demo charts today. What I am going to do is I'm going to ask Brian to go ahead and show off some of the grid examples, which are pretty slick and a pretty robust experience you'll get on the grid. So Brian, can you show a couple grid examples?
No problem. Just let me see when you see my emulator.
We see it.
Okay, great. So what I have running here is the Visual Studio Android emulator. Now, when you install our product, our sample browser APK is installed with the Android product. So to install this, simply take the sample browser APK, drag and drop it onto the running Visual Studio emulator, Android emulator, and it will install it. So that's how you install an APK on the Visual Studio emulator. Once it's installed, you'll see a little icon that says sample browser. Click on that and then start running the app. Now, we want to show you the grid because we're kind of really excited about it. We're doing a lot of new things. We're really pushing the envelope and innovating on how grid should work on these different devices. So let's go ahead and click on grid. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the column types. Of course, our grid has text columns, date columns, numeric, images, template columns, all this stuff. This is basic stuff. What I do want to start showing you is kind of how our grid behaves when you're adding columns or removing columns or exchanging columns. So here we have a sample. I'm going to click the add column, and then I don't know how well that came over the what are we using?
GoToMeeting.
GoToMeeting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how well that came over GoToMeeting, but when you add a column, we have a very rich animation framework built into the control that lets you give you that end users, that polish that you would expect to have on these type of devices. Now, let's go to something that I think is really cool, and that's remote data. We have a remote data source that allows us to basically get our data from an OData feed and then bring that in and have real-time data loading. So as I scroll, the data is loaded based on the configuration of the data source. So if I said, my page size is 25 or 300, I'm only fetching 300 records at a time, and as I get close to that 300 record, I load the next 300 records. Now I'm going to try to demonstrate this. I'm going to say scroll to row 500, and what you're going to see is you're not going to see any real information. It's going to be like placeholder fuzzed out data, and then the data will fade in as it's loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that button. I don't know how well it's going to come over. Hopefully it does well, so let's see what happens. So now you saw very briefly the little placeholder boxes for where the data should be, and then we asynchronously loaded the data from the OData feed. This is a really cool feature, and if you can scroll it fast enough with your finger, you'll see it real time as you scroll up. We'll bring that data in asynchronously. Your UI will never freeze, and you never have to worry about paging or nothing like. Just continuously scroll. It's really cool. Really excited about that. Now, another one that's really cool is we have a complete responsive grid architecture, and you have complete control over this. So what this means is you can define what sizes or when columns are shown, when they're not shown, what type of columns. You can control the transition between them, animate in, animate out. It is extremely awesome. So for example, I'm going to change the grid size using this button, and as I do that, you can see that we had a column animate out. So I'm going to change it again. The next one, we picked a different one that's going to animate out. And of course, we'll make it big again, and we'll animate both of them in. Of course, you don't have to animate. You can just have them show if you want. We were just trying to show some of the jazziness and functionality of the animation framework built into this. Now, that's cool if you're doing programmatically like that, but let's say you want it to occur on rotations, right? So here, this emulator is Nexus 7. Now, I'm showing two columns here. When I rotate this, we're going to have a different view, and we're going to bring in more columns automatically. As you can see, we did some cool stuff with animations. We brought some stuff in. We swapped out a column, changed a column. If I rotate back, we go back to how we had it before. We changed out the name to a full name. As you can see, this is really cool, and this is the same grid that's going to show up eventually on iOS. It's going to be in UWP. You're going to have so much control and flexibility over this grid and what it can do. And the performance is amazing. That's one of the biggest things that we really wanted to highlight and focus on is performance. So on this particular version of the grid, this preview, we have selection. We also have multi-row selection, but we are not editable yet. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Right now, this is a read-only grid. We hope to have editing in, not hope, we will have editing in this year. But for now, it's still read-only. But please play with this. Let us know what you think. Give us feedback. We really want to know, if we're going the right direction, things we have to think about, scenarios we need to think about. But I'm really excited about this grid. The responsiveness alone is just amazing, and no one can match it. There's no one out there who can match this.
And one of the cool things, Brian, is even like, from a UX perspective, I would hope that you don't put your customers through editing cells in a grid, but we are going to enable it. It's good for things like changing date fields and whatnot. But of course, a mobile pattern would be to select a row and then, change it over to an editable form. When you start designing your applications, don't think of the application as, oh, this is how I'm going to take my WPF app and make it, look like a mobile app. There's all these different ways to look at the user experience. And the cool thing about our Android grid, as Brian said, not only is the performance unbelievable and unmatched, it's very flexible. And you've seen the same thing in our iOS grid, and you get the same experience with Android. And not to mention, I'm not going to talk about iOS today, but we have pretty much everything you can imagine on iOS as well. So if you're interested in doing native mobile, take a look. So for web, I'm going to quickly go through because we're really blowing out of time here. We're showing off too much stuff, and I want to make sure we get to George for at least 2 minutes. My favorite feature in this release for 15.2 for the web is around scaffolding. So I've been, to show my age, been working with Microsoft tools since 1991, 1992. The beauty of it's always been ease of use, and Visual Studio, or back then Visual InterDev, Visual Basic, you name it. I was able to quickly build applications and make them, data entry very quickly, and then write all the code that I wanted. Well, one of the gaps in Visual Studio as far as web development is this whole WYSIWYG, awesome ease of use experience when it comes to third-party components like Ignite UI. So what we're starting to do in Visual Studio is build in more of that tooling that makes it easy for you to get applications up and running. And we started with the grid in 15.2 with the scaffolder with MVC. And you can actually create an MVC application, add a scaffolded view, and it will generate the code for the Ignite UI controls. So all of a sudden, instead of having this plain Jane, boring sort of UI that you had to redo anyway in MVC, now you're going to start seeing Ignite UI controls introduced, which will really help your productivity and drive applications to completion faster. Another project we've been actually working on over the last probably year, maybe a little bit more, was re-architecting our editors. So the internet and web technology is moving about 50 times faster than any of us can think. So when we start building out components in 2011 for HTML, next version, HTML5, and all this JavaScript stuff, a few years later, that stuff's like outdated, and it's not the most modern way to approach development. So what we've done is we've refactored and re-engineered all of the editors, which actually are probably some of the most important controls in the toolkit. The good thing about this is these are essentially just replacements for what you have. You're not going to run into breaking changes. We've ensured that we have documentation that says, hey, this feature works in this way now because this is the pattern for the web. So take a look at the editors. They're all super lightweight, super capable, and really match that modern lightweight experience that you would expect. Then across the board, we've added a bunch of productivity features in the tree grid. That's an awesome control we released last year. In 15.2, you got remote sorting, paging, and filtering with MVC, row selectors, a bunch of features, breadcrumbs. Cool thing across the board is we have Excel exporting. So we talked about the spreadsheet control and the other platforms being based on Excel. Well, now that Excel library is in JavaScript, we released that last year, but now you can start exporting all of your grids and tree grids, etc., with that as well. And then the combo box we've done a lot of cool work with. One of my favorite features is this grouping feature in the combo box. So being able to group items and have that really nice autocomplete experience is slick. And then the grid, we've improved accessibility. We actually RTM the exporter and added a few other features. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into a quick demo because I want George to show off some Indigo stuff. One of the nice things we've done with the sample browser is if I just go to all samples here in 15.2, this is igniteui.com, we've improved the navigation a little bit, restyled it a little bit, so it's a little bit faster. We're continuing to work on this experience. We've also have this new and updated capability, so I can just show what's new and updated. And you'll see in my menu on my new and updated that we've done a lot of work on two big areas, TypeScript and Angular. So if you felt that, oh, the Angular support isn't awesome for XYZ control, well, you'll see as I scroll down, we've basically touched every control of TypeScript and or Angular. And you'll also see as I scroll down, there's a ton of stuff in this release. I mean, we've done actually a lot of neat things. So let me jump over to the exporter, and I'm going to bring up hierarchical grid. And here in my hierarchical grid, I want to export all rows. We've got a few options here, and I'm just going to click export, and this will jump up in Excel, or it'll actually jump down here. Let me double click it, open this guy up in Excel, and then in Excel we've got the hierarchical views for this grid. So you can see that I can expand and collapse these guys if I enable editing. This is in protected view. If I enable editing, I can expand and collapse those views. Now if I show this in Fiddle, this is the slick thing. Of course, every sample is available in JS Fiddle, and I'm just going to scroll down here, and you'll notice that it is a single line of code. Grid exporter.export, and then we call export grid. You tell it what grid to export, and then the mode. In this case, it's all of the values, and there's different modes to this. But this is exactly how Windows Forms worked in like 2006, I think, 2007 when we shifted Windows Forms. So we're taking these components, moving them to all of the platforms to really deliver this amazing experience and make it super, super simple for you to do exactly sort of what I just showed with one line of code, really show off some of the great capability. And let me go back to new and updated here. I will show one other thing, and then I'm going to pass it over to George. Let me look at the combo. So I'm going to type up the combo grouping and bring up this example. So just to show you, I will click my drop down in the combo. You can see that I have grouped items. If I start to type in like carry, you'll notice that it's bypassing my groups, and it's just bringing up the autocomplete list. Let me hit backspace. I can group by different items. So you throw hierarchical data at this, and it'll actually group it. And you can change the sort direction, etc. So unfortunately, I can't spend a lot more time on Ignite UI. The slides and obviously the What's New blogs are on the site, so you can see all the cool things. But I would suggest going to igniteui.com and just perusing all of the new stuff that we've added. All the samples are there. And of course, as I showed off in JS Fiddle, you get all of the source for everything to play with it as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to George. He's going to do a quick couple minutes on Indigo design, and then we'll wrap it up.
The beach ball sprang up when I didn't need it. All right, so as you already know, Indigo Studio is our UX prototyping tool, and it does prototyping UX flows exceptionally well. But once you're done with the prototype, the main goal of the prototyping tool is to actually send it to someone so that they can take a look at it and give you some feedback. So sharing was as simple as, you click Share Prototype, and then you have this Share dialog pop up. And I'm just going to sign in as myself here. And the cool stuff we added this time around is that, yes, you could always share prototypes in the cloud. And that's a pure HTML-based prototype. So let me just swing over here. And this basically emulates everything you prototype, all the slick transitions, all the animations running right inside the browser. So you actually don't need a special app just to view the prototype. But naturally, the other aspect of prototyping is that you need to collect feedback of some kind. So what you see as a very simple checkbox here saying enable commenting, that's the entire infrastructure we built on top of Indigo Design. So for any prototype you share on Indigo Design, you need to be signed in to do that. You can actually enable comments so that anybody who has access to that URL can actually jump into the prototype, review it, and give you feedback on what the prototype is, whether it meets the requirements or if they need some kind of changes. So this is like the admin view. And as I said, this is running in HTML in the browser. And it's the flows concept, right? So it's actually showing you all the screen states, which no other prototyping tool does for you, and we do this automatically. But as a reviewer, so let me just open the screen back again. As a reviewer, what I can actually now do is I'm the owner of this prototype. So what I just invoked here is the comments panel. So what you're looking at the prototype as an owner, I can just come in here. And if I want to correspond or talk about what the prototype is doing, or if I want to respond to something, it's as simple as just going in there. And you've all used Facebook, I know it. And it's as simple as saying, hey, this is a new comment. And it just posts the comment for me. And in addition to that, what we have also done is that we've given you some quick filters to let you manage comments which are on a certain prototype. So as an owner of the prototype, I can actually mark a certain comment for follow-up because that's an important comment, and I don't want to follow up on my own comment, but somebody else's comment. So I say, James, this is a slick prototype, and I want to respond to James for some other reason. I can actually mark it for follow-up, and then I have these filters here, which lets me filter through new comments on this prototype, comments which have been marked for follow-up. And I can, as an owner of the prototype, I can also archive comments which I feel have been resolved and they're just adding noise to this conversation. So we are not deleting anything, so you can always have the control to bring it back. The other stuff we added is some basic marker support. So what that means is that I made a comment about some part of the UI, and I want to say, hey, the sliders are not very visible down here. I can actually make that comment and say, the sliders are not very visible. And I have this marker, I can just take it and drop it right on that comment area. And then I can do this retroactively. So this is a comment which didn't have a marker anywhere on the UI. I can still go back and say, okay, you know what? It was not clear what I was talking about. So I can just add a marker here and drop it, say, somewhere on that UI. So when you click markers, you will be able to actually highlight the comments which are associated with that marker. The comments are also unique to every UI state. So what that means, if the user goes to a new state, and now you have a comment about this state, you can just say the same thing. You just add new comment here. And that's that. Now, it's great to be collaborative. So sometimes you don't want to keep checking how do you want to do new comments. Are there new comments on this prototype? So what we have actually added is the notion of near real-time comments. So here I'm showing you another screen on the right side, and I'm logged in as an anonymous user, as a reviewer. And that's another thing we added in commenting, is that as a reviewer, you actually do not need a Infragistics account or a Google sign-in. As long as somebody shared that URL with you, it's like giving you access. So as a reviewer, I can just go in here and say, yeah, I see it. I think it's okay. But all we expect from you is just a name. That's the bare minimum which you need to provide. So I can say I'm Jim, and I can post the comment. That's great. Now, as a reviewer, you also have the option to subscribe to notifications. So all that's a simple checkbox which you check for enable commenting. We've built this entire infrastructure to support that whole workflow of collaborating over prototypes. And I can just provide a simple email. I can say my name at infragistics.com. And then I can just turn on notifications. So what this means is that anytime somebody adds a new comment on this particular prototype, I'll get notified. And right now you see there are two people being notified. It's me as the owner of the prototype, and then Jim, which is the anonymous user, which is you. And as these things get added, on my side of things, if I have the prototype open, I actually get notified about new comments which are just added. So I didn't actually have to refresh the prototype to see these new comments which was just added by Jim. It automatically updates in that list, so you don't have to do anything special about it. And we had announced Indigo Studio, a while back, Indigo designed a while back, and as new comments get added, even when you're on this UI, you'll see a comment bubble which will appear on top of that prototype. And at any point in time, as an owner of the prototype, I can say, you know what, this prototype has got really chatty, it has served its purpose, I don't want people commenting on it anymore. I can just as easily go in here and change my notification settings to either turn off my email notifications, or I can close this commenting altogether. So what this means is that the existing comments are visible, but no new comments are accepted, or I could switch it back at any time saying, no, I want to open it back up for commenting. Right? So it's a very simple workflow, but we try to make it really simple, but it is really powerful in terms of what it allows you as an owner of the prototype and what it allows you to do, how free it is for an anonymous reviewer we have sent the prototype to. That's pretty much the commenting story, which we feel is the next leg for any prototype, is getting reviewed.
Very cool. That's awesome, George. Thanks. What you're going to see is more and more around Indigo Studio tying into the other components. So right now, or the other platform. So right now in Indigo Studio, if you create a design, you can actually export that design to HTML5 JavaScript with Ignite. So it's actually pretty sweet. Oh, is that new software from Apple? Is that me? Yeah, we really want that. God. So just to wrap this up, let me minimize all my windows here. When we talk about Ultimate, really we do want to give you everything you need to build amazing apps. So our focus is ensuring that you have the right features at the right time, really high performance across the board. That's our investment. And then, moving forward, investing really heavily in things like Indigo Studio, in JavaScript HTML5, in our Android controls, in our iOS controls, but then keeping the investments up in WPF and Windows Forms. And hopefully you saw that today. Hopefully you got an idea of all the great things that are available. What I'm going to do is close off the webinar now since we actually are over. I apologize for that. But we tried to answer every question. If we didn't, we will. We have everyone here online answering questions very quickly. If you have other questions, please email me directly, jasonb@infragistics.com, and I will get back to you or route the question to the right person. And I want to thank everyone again for attending. Thanks for being customers, and hopefully you enjoy 15.2, and we look forward now to 16.1. Thank you.